one of the biggest struggles for those who are self-aware, or at least who are self-aware to a certain degree. So you have to be a little bit more than just like tiny little self-aware. Regardless, one of the biggest struggles that I guess a lot of people who are self-aware have and notice in them in their lives is sometimes they notice themselves behaving differently than how they've used to be. So you're doing something or you've been behaving in a certain way for some time and then suddenly you start behaving in a little bit of a different way. As an example, you've been extremely productive for a while, you've been putting yourself first, priority list and this, and then somewhere between the lines you start behaving a little bit different, and then people, at least a lot of people, struggle with the question, why am I behaving different? And whether this is something I want or not, and whether they decide that it's something they want or not, leads to the biggest struggle, which is finding the balance. In many different ways, we usually, like, I'm going to take you as an example, or even me, a lot of people, to be honest, in that regard. There's a phase where you're like extremely productive and you're focusing on your productivity or on your goals, whatever it is, that you end up forgetting maybe an essential part of who you are or who you want to be. And then somewhere between the lines, you start noticing that you're behaving different and you start questioning why, and or you don't question why, and then something happens and kind of gets you back to behaving how you want to be. And then you start kind of to realize that, oh, I've been focusing too much on productivity that I forgot to enjoy life in very simple terms. And that leads us to realizing that, okay, we don't have a balance there between this side of us and the other side of us, or between this thing and this thing in our lives. And then that leads again to this subject of this episode, which is balance. As the Taoism would describe it, or one of the ways Taoism describe balance in life, it's like one of those old clocks. I don't know. I generally have no idea what they're called. Where you've got the thing in the middle that keeps on going, swinging left and right and making the noises and the ticks per second. And the Taoism goes like, when the ticks or when the thingy that's swinging goes to one side of the extreme, then it has to go back to the other side of the extreme. Exactly. And then if it doesn't go to the side of the extreme and it goes only something in the middle, then it goes to the middle of the other part of it, which is related to physics, of course. Taoism mentioned that, or take that as an example of why or of how balance works. I guess Taoism also, if not Taoism, then it was Alan Watts that mentioned that it's quite hard to get it stay in the middle, or it's almost impossible to get in the middle, and it's always going to be swinging. But of course, the difference is it going to swing to the extremes and then to the other extreme of the spectrum, or is it going to swing a little bit here and then a little bit here, which is getting you to be more in tune and finding more and more balance. I've been on for a little bit too long for the introduction, but I'm going to go ahead and give you the mic here and ask the question. Let's start with what's your own experience with finding balance in your life?
I mean, I will start by saying that the point you mentioned about self-awareness is very important, because you wouldn't know if you are in balance or not balanced if you don't have this self-awareness. And I see it in the way that when you are self-aware of who you are or your identity, you have this like ideal image of who you want to be in the future. I'm close to my friends. I'm very good at my job. I'm financially free. All of these different aspects. And the thing is, the thing that I notice the most is that you can't work on every aspect of your life at the same time. So it is always a struggle. Like, which area am I going to focus on? And this was basically my struggle since I started with improving myself, since I became self-aware and noticed that my life is not going the way I want it to be, and I started to have this ideal image of who I want to be and started to work on that. So I was really productive for a very long time, and that made me neglect my relationships, my emotions, and then I would tone down the productivity a little bit and focus on my emotions more. And then I noticed that I am not as productive as I want to be, and it's always this never-ending cycle that keeps going until now, which is something that I improve at just tiny bits over time, but it is still a big struggle. And I think many people have this exact same struggle, no matter where they are on their journey. But yeah, it's all about this ideal image that you have in your head that you're trying to work on, and it's always taking you left and right, and it's so hard to find this like middle point, whether if we talk about Taoism with this clock, or if we look at the Swedish concept, which is called Lagom, I think, where they talk about, or they live the lifestyle of trying everything in moderation, no matter what you're trying to do. If you're trying to be productive, if you want to try drugs, if you want to meet new people, like you try to not to go to the extremes too much, and tip your toes, I guess, a little bit here and there, and finding the midpoint somewhere. And it just basically tells you that even good things can be bad, and bad things are sometimes good, as long as you're trying to find the balance and not going in rabbit holes or going to the extremes, you know? So I think it is connected in a way to this idea of finding the balance in everything. Because even if you want to focus on productivity, if you are always just trying to push yourself to be more successful and better at the work that you're doing, you're going to burn out eventually. It doesn't matter if you love to work or not. You need to chill once in a while and take a break and take a step back, take a day off, take a vacation, whatever it is. And at the same time, if you're trying to improve your relationships, for example, you spend most of your time spending it with your friends and family, then your career is going nowhere. Then what are you doing with your life? So yeah,
Okay. In that regard, you can't forget that to each their own, in the sense of like everyone got different priorities and everyone got different
sure,
goals. Some
sure.
people think like, okay, I'm happy with my career, so I want to do something else, and then, or they don't want to progress that much in the career because it's not really.
But if you are happy with your career, then you did things to reach that point that you're happy with your
It
career.
it depends. In my opinion, there's many factors there that it's not easy, or it's almost impossible for us to be able to kind of tell.
I mean, for every person, maybe this balance looks different. You know, like what the balance for me is different than what it is for you. But the core idea is just if you go to the deep end of something, then maybe you get stuck and you want to get out, but it just
The
becomes
reaction is
hard.
gonna always be going on the other side of the spectrum of it, and it's technically like when you force yourself to overeat all the time and eat unhealthy food. Somewhere down the line, whether it's because of external issues or internal issues, or external reasons or internal reasons, you're gonna end up going to the other side of the spectrum, and which is eating too much healthy food and then focusing on not eating anything unhealthy because of either health circumstances or because you've noticed that your body is not behaving in the way that you want it to.
And basically, you're just going to the other extreme, which also
It's gonna send you to the other extreme as well.
and this is actually ties to, like, I think we've talked about this before, about this human nature where we just tend to do the complete opposite of our usual behavior when we get frustrated or burned out. So the example in my life is that I used to be a very lazy person. I used to smoke weed every day and I didn't want to do anything. So when I started with improving myself, I just went to the complete opposite of, I just want to do productive things. I only want to do things that are good for my future. I don't want to play video games anymore. I want to do this. And I also got burned out from that. And so you can't go back to the other end. And this is also not working. So where's the midpoint? You know? So it really ties to this idea of doing the complete opposite sometimes when from our usual behavior.
What do you tie, or would you tie balanced life to anything else?
I think you can tie it to anything in life because I see it as a fundamental core idea of how life works. Like we all know about the yin and yang, about the two ends, like the good and evil, the God and the devil, how even the black and white thinking in psychology, where you would either see things as really bad and you have this pessimistic view on the world, or you have this extremely positive view where everything is good, people are always happy, everyone have good intentions about you. and both are just unrealistic views on the world. But if you focus on the gray area, which lays in the middle, you start to see that bad things are going to happen in the world, but good things are happening at the same time. And some people are going to behave in a way that you won't like, but it doesn't mean that they are necessarily evil people or so. And so when you have this balance, you basically can see this gray area in life where life is not about these extreme ends, but rather it's a flow in everything. It's a mix of everything. Your life is going to be good sometimes. You're going to feel happy, and in other times you're going to be sad and feeling low, and that's completely natural. And when we focus on just one extreme, I want to be happy all the time, that's only going to backfire. And in the same way, when you're depressed the whole time, then you're not going to do anything in your life. But I would say that a healthy person, a balanced person, is sometimes sad, but it's okay. He knows that it will pass and he will be happy again. It's always this like back and forth relationship. It's like a dance of life, as Alan Watts say. Yeah. So I would say just you can tie it to everything in life.
I kind of look at it in the sense of adaptability as well.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I like that.
Bruce Lee said, "Be like water, my friend," and I'm pretty sure this is something everybody heard about at least once. And he said, "Be like water, my friend." That's.
I mean, we are water, basically.
And of course, he goes on and he talks a little bit more about it and he explained it. But the way that it clicked in with me was, be like water, my friend. Be like water, where you can fit in the bottle when you're in a bottle. You can fit in the kettle when you're in a kettle. You can fit in a jar when you're in a jar. Be like water, my friend. When there is strong winds, you're gonna have strong waves, and those waves are gonna clash with things, and then the wind is gonna go down at some point, and then the waves of you is also gonna go down. So it's like you're not only just adaptable, but if you look at it like water is
adaptable.
Water can be solid, water can be liquidy.
It changes shape.
It changes shape, it changes its temperature, it changes its state, because it have got frozen ice, which is technically frozen water. Evaporates. And I look at it like, be like water, my friend, which means if you're going to take that analogy and we're going to look at the water from the seas, which is technically, let's say, your inner state, and then you've got the wind, and you've got the wind, which is like your life circumstances, and then when there's strong wind, and which means there's harsh circumstances or certain circumstances, your waves are going to be a little bit stronger. You're going to be a little bit crashing and bumping into a lot of things, which is kind of what's going to happen when you go a little bit more on one side of the spectrum, because you're dealing with a specific scenario. And then when the wind goes down, which means when that phase of life passes over, the water of the sea is going to be more calm, more soft, maybe more in tune. Let's put it like this. So, but when I think about it, like the first time that I heard the quote from Bruce Lee, it didn't really click that much with me until the time came where I started thinking of balance in my life. And for some reason, this is like one of the quotes that kept on repeating in my head, which is like, be like water, my friend. And since recently I've been trying to work a little bit more on my balance, I've come up with an analogy. That goes like, be as cold as fire and be as hot as ice. Maybe in the first instance, it wouldn't really make a lot of sense. But the reason why I went with this analogy personally, it's because be as hot as ice and as cold as fire means that be a little bit more adaptable and
be firm as well.
Be a little bit more. Remember that, like, you can connect it to many scenarios, and I don't want to go on explaining this analogy for hours because it's been in my head for a few weeks now, and I've been trying to elaborate more and more and be more clear on it. So I can go on and talk about this analogy for hours, but I want to spare you guys the suffering of this. I look at it like cold as fire is when life is too pushy, maybe when the circumstances are a bit too harsh. Try to be cold in the sense of try to be calm, try to remain or keep the thingy that's swinging, not to go to the extreme, but try to keep it a little bit more calm. And when life is going a little bit too slow and there's a lot of things to do, you can be as hot as ice. Ice is life that's going a little bit slow, and then be as hot as ice. Hot here stands kind of for don't be just cold, don't be just like too bored or maybe too disconnected. But instead, be more joyful, be more grateful, be more outgoing, and do the things that kind of light that fire inside of you.
You can also tie it then to stoicism in a sense as well, like what it means to be stoic. You know, some people interpret it as like you lack emotions or you don't connect with your emotions. It's not really that. It's just about that situations are gonna happen and your circumstances are gonna change and certain emotions are gonna arise, but you don't dwell on these states. You know how to have them under control and not let them change the way that you view things and the decisions that you're going to make. And that's basically it. Like, that's how optimally we should view everything. That we don't let the swing take us to the extreme end, and we're just like observing it. I guess like going back and forth, and we just try to have our balance, to stay on the rope and not fall down. So yeah, I mean, as you know, I also struggle with this balancing issue, but I don't know. It's been like 3 years now since I've been working on myself, and I know that I'm improving at it. I know that. I mean, I remember like 2 years ago when I was being really productive, I was really bad at my social connections. Like, I didn't have as many conversations as I do now, and I didn't connect with people as well as I do now. I still have issues with that. I'm not in the optimal.
Can't just
Exactly. It's just a process. Like, I work on it for a few months and then I neglect it for a few weeks and then I go back on that. Then I neglect productivity for a few weeks and then I go back. It's always the same in this back and forth relationships, but I think that's kind of normal. Like, you can't streamline this thing, and it's not gonna go just like any journey in your life, just like any goals that you're trying to work on. It's not a straight line. It's always gonna be, it's like pitfalls and mountains and things that are gonna stand in your way, and you're gonna forget things. There are moments where you forget everything that you've learned, and you're just gonna be in this moment of extreme emotions or whatever, and you're gonna go back to the path that you're on, working on this balance.
it's I find it to be the normal, at least
I think
for
it's
me at this
normal.
point. It's kind of the human experience that if you're so like we can go back to the philosophical point of it, which is like if you're always if you're happy all the time, then what is happiness to you?
Yeah.
So it's normal that you're gonna have times when you are on this side of the spectrum and the other times where you're on the side of the spectrums,
Exactly.
and that always teaches you something. And then with time, you will be able to get it tuned down a little bit, maybe, so you're not always on the extremes of the spectrum.
You're not as
and
long.
then even when you do that, you don't know, maybe something is gonna happen external outside of your control is gonna happen to you. And sure, as Stoicism, we should be talking about not letting that affect you, but we know that we're human beings,
It's still gonna affect you,
and it's gonna have some effect on you. And whether it's a small or big effect, everyone react to different things differently. That might take you to one side of the spectrum, and then remember that at some point you're gonna start slowly going back.
Remember that it's not
it's something you can definitely work on and improve.
But remember, it's not about not being affected at all. It's about shortening the period of this reaction, I guess. Like,
but it's not always. Sometimes, yeah, but like even if it's not like a reaction time or something external, it just, I guess, kind of normal for us as human beings to always go from one side of the spectrum to the other. Not one side of the spectrum, but to always like be swinging left and right.
So human nature,
and
I think our default is this black and white thinking.
It's hard to get in the middle. It's I guess it's probably it's hard to get in the middle. I don't know if it's possible, I don't know if it's impossible either. I'm not that far that I can give any input about it. I've tried to think about it, to be honest, for a long time, but I've never came up with any answer that even felt logical, maybe even genuine to me. It always felt like, okay, maybe this is what it's mean to be on the way to finding balance, or to be balanced, which is, you're acceptant of the fact that you're just gonna be swinging, but the swings are not as big as they should be, and they're just like small swings within period of times, depending on what's going on in your life, depending on the current goals that you've got, or in the short-term goals that you've got, or what you're working on. And
in my opinion, like, you can't.
That's the only thing that I could come up with.
Yeah. In my opinion, like, as you've said, but I believe in that more than you, maybe, that you can't have this balance all the time. And I connected to a topic from an earlier episode where we were talking about pure consciousness. Because also, when it comes to that, in my opinion, you can't be in that pure consciousness state all the time. But it's all about being more and more in that state. But there are still things that are going to happen that are going to get you out of it. So you are swinging, and then you go back. You're swinging, and then you go back. You're going to have a certain emotion. You're going to go off balance. How do you get back? And improving in that thing means that you remember more often what you should do, how you should react, and going back to that balance. So I guess if I could give an advice about this thing, which I still haven't resolved, and I don't think it will be completely resolved no matter what we do, is just to try to improve just a little bit and becoming more self-aware. And you need to notice when you are going off balance and what can you do about it. But don't think that you're gonna completely resolve such a thing. And it is always a constant improvement journey, I guess, just like everything else we talk about. Yeah.
Yep, everything is an improvement journey.
Exactly.
Regardless of what we talk about, it always ends up with this sentence.
There is no, like, that's why we shouldn't focus on the destination, it's always the journey that you're on, and working on that and focusing on that the moment you're in. But if you focus on destination, you're gonna realize that you're not gonna reach it. It's a never-ending step points, I guess. Like, you might think you have reached that
the end
point,
of the top of the summit of the first mountain is just
another mountain,
the beginning of the second mountain.
Yeah,
but yeah,
exactly.
I guess that's it for this episode.
Yeah, I think so as well.
Thank you for watching. If you stayed with us so far, don't forget to subscribe and like, and leave a comment about your point of view and your experience with balance in life.